Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
This is Byron O'Neill for Comic Book Yeti, sitting down today with writers Thomas Sniegoski and Jeannine Acheson to talk about their new Dynamite Comics series, Pantha. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Pantha is a pretty well-established character. She started out in 1974, which is pretty old. That was the year I was born. It feels like a long time. So for those that are unfamiliar with her, who is Pantha and what is happening with her this time around?
All right, well, who wants to go? You want me to do it?
You give the history.
All right, I'll give the history. The history of Panther is kind of schizophrenic. So if you look at how she was originally presented in the old black and white Warren magazines, there was like one take on the character, and even that seemed like they weren't quite sure what the character was all about.
Sure.
And then Harris started publishing her like in a few miniseries, and that was a completely different direction that kind of ignored what Warren had set up also. So when Dynamite started doing it, they were leaning more towards the Harris stuff. But then Christopher Priest, in his Vampirella run and Secret Six run, kind of like pulled all the stuff together on Panther and kind of cleaned it up and kind of left it for us to be able to like go from the origin straight to a new take on the character.
Sure.
So she's basically a really nasty Egyptian princess who was responsible for killing all the male children.
All the male children.
At a certain point in Egyptian history, because there was a male child that was going to take her throne from a concubine of her husband. So when her husband passed away, the concubine's male son was going to become the pharaoh. And she didn't like that. So basically she made a deal with a Sekhmet, an Egyptian goddess, and kind of lied in the deal and said, "Oh, I need to find this baby. This baby's so important to me. I mean, you got to help me." So Sekhmet kind of gave her the ability to see through the eyes of cats and things like that to find this baby, but never found the baby, and so just decided to slaughter all the male children born within a certain point in Egypt. And then Sekhmet found out that she lied to her and said, "I'm going to curse you." And the curse is the ability to turn into this 2-ton black panther, this big black panther, whenever emotions get riled and things like that. So that's kind of where she is. And she's cursed to live forever too. So she's immortal until the curse is lifted.
Well, you have a long history, Tom, with the Vampirella, mythos. So
Yeah.
What made you want to take this project on specifically and reinvent it?
Probably because of the fact that all the stuff that had been done before with the character really wasn't like clear. It was so confused and schizophrenic. Christopher Priest was the first time that there was a clear view of the character that was like, wow, that's really neat. We should do something. I would love to do something with her. And Nikki came to me, and I dragged Jeannine along with me because she's this kind of Egyptian junkie. She loves like Egyptian mythology and stuff like that. So pulled her into it. She's new to comics, by the way. So she's a relative newbie when it comes to writing comics and stuff. So we can kind of make fun of her on that. But yeah, so that was the main reason, was that I felt that we were going to get a chance to put a really fresh spin on the character that she's never really had before. So, yeah.
Well, she kind of spun out this time of that reinvention of the Sacred Six. So
Yeah.
is she going to exist more on her own, or is the intent to kind of integrate her more into the wider Vampirella universe?
I think as of right now, we're kind of establishing herself. It's taking place in that universe, I believe. I think they wanted to, the whole Sacred Six universe, but our focus is kind of establishing her as her own character before we start doing like crossovers and things like that, if they want to do them. But this first story arc, this first 5 issues, kind of sets up who she is, what she is, and where she's going from that point. So,
is it more fun to create with those established characters, or do you like inventing the new ones?
I'm gonna let Jeannine.
Nice. Okay.
I think it's really cool that we kind of get to put our own spin on her. Like, we're using the mythology that she has, but then we're kind of bringing her into the 2000s, into the 21st century. She's very modern in our take. She's very innocent too, but it's interesting that we'll get to kind of watch her development over the course of the story arc. So it's fun. It's really fun. It's nice to use what we started out with, what Christopher Priest laid forth, and we kind of built on that. So it's a little bit of what was already there, but a big us spin too, I think.
Yeah, I think he left us enough wiggle room to kind of really do some cool stuff with the world, like establishing the world in which she interacts and the kind of characters she interacts with, especially with the whole gods and Egyptian mythology stuff. We really get to play with that quite a bit.
Sure. I mean, a lot of the world building in some sense is kind of done because Egyptian mythology has such a rich tradition anyway.
Right.
Are you sticking more to the established pantheon, or are we taking a few liberties and kind of inventing some new stuff?
Liberties galore. We kind of, again, with the Egyptian gods, we've kind of given them a new spin as well, and we brought them into the 21st century. The gods that we've met so far in our story arc are all still hanging on, and even though they are Egyptian gods, old gods like Yeti and Sekhmet and all of the ones that people would be familiar with, we kind of give them a new spin, and they've become kind of like cult heroes. So they're televangelists, they're celebrity chefs, they're Instagram influencers, that kind of thing. So they thrive on adulation and love from wherever it comes from.
Yeah, that's how we've established it. That's how the gods continue to survive, by reinventing themselves. So, being an internet sensation or a television celebrity feeds them the adoration that they need in order to continue to live. So,
sure. Well, we're introduced to some of them in the first issue. I've got to ask, is there actually a patron god of bartenders? Because that was pretty specific.
There is.
There actually were a few.
Okay.
There were.
Yeah, there actually was a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we did when we found that there was like multiple things, we kind of like integrated aspects into like one, just so we didn't have, all the fun parts we put into one god as opposed to having multiple gods.
So were both of you reasonably fluent with Egyptian mythology going in, or did you have to do a bunch of additional research for it?
Jeannine was more than I was. I was familiar with the basic stuff.
Okay.
But Jeannine is kind of an Egyptian junkie, so she kind of was more up on a lot of that stuff than I was.
Yeah. We did a lot of additional research too.
Yeah.
Well, I'd imagine you kind of have to, I would think. So you got Pantha, who is a shapeshifter. So skinwalkers and shapeshifters are common throughout kind of all the world's mythologies. Are there more in the Egyptian pantheon? Will we see them if we're not giving too much away?
Oh, that's actually a really good idea. We were so focused. We're so focused on this first story arc with the gods and an even older god coming back and stuff like that, that we haven't really gone beyond that point. But that's actually that would be a cool way to have her interact with some interesting other characters.
Yeah. Note to self.
Note to self. All right, Jane.
I'll write that down.
You're welcome.
Write that down.
Well, tell me about your collaborative approach to writing. So, how long have you been working together? How do you know each other?
All right, I'll let you.
Here we go.
I'll let you tell that.
All right. So Tom and I went to high school together.
Okay.
Like 40 years ago. And up until last year, I was a middle school teacher. I taught English. And we had a unit where I needed an author to come to talk to my kids. And I needed somebody who had written a book that had been made into a movie. And I remembered that Tom and I had lost touch long ago. And I remembered that he had had three of his books actually made into movies, the Fallen series. So I emailed him and I said, hey, would you be willing to come and talk to my students? And he said, sure. And then we started to talk and we corresponded and we started to really like reconnect. And he was like, you ought to be writing. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he convinced me to give that a try. And so last year during the pandemic, we wrote a novel. And then I think it was in November of last year, he asked me, or the year before, he asked me if I wanted to write a comic with him. And so we wrote the Valentine's Day special of Vampirella together. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of snowballed, and we've been writing comics and books and novels and short stories and children's books and everything ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It is kind of crazy. It was just like this kind of whirlwind thing, like, you should be doing this. I don't know anything about comics.
I know nothing.
Come on, I'll teach you.
Well, paused and bless you for being a teacher. My mom was an 8th grade English teacher.
Oh, real? Yeah.
That's where Byron comes from, Lord Byron. All that.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, when I saw your name at first, I was like,
Yeah. So what is the secret sauce for a collaboration successfully as writers?
You want me to go ahead? Well, it's really interesting because of the fact that with the comic stuff, she was very, I think she had more of a knack with the prose stuff when we were writing a book together, as opposed to the comic stuff. The comic stuff is like writing a movie script, basically. And so I had to kind of go through a lot of steps, kind of like, all right, this is how you have to picture this. This is how you have to describe it for the artist. This is how, you know what I mean? So we're still learning.
Yeah.
We're still learning, but she's picking up incredibly fast. I mean, we wrote the Vampyverse miniseries, 6 issues of that. She did fantastic with that. But like right now, when we get together like at least twice a week, and then we Zoom and Skype and the whole 9 yards, and we just kind of bat things around. We kind of just everything's done like a skeleton. When we're writing a script, we do the plot first, like break it down in plot, then figure out how many pages everything is going to be, and then we just kind of work on page 1, panel 1, give the description.
Okay.
We lay it out basically, and then after it's all laid out, we sit down and actually start to script it. So that's the whole process.
Yeah.
Well, let's brag on the rest of the creative team, because the book is beautiful. After looking through Q1, it's really, really pretty. So how did the rest of the creative team come together?
That stuff all comes to, I mean, we're seeing that stuff as Matt Idelson, our editor, gets it and presents it to us. Hey, What do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? It goes almost in like layers.
Okay.
So we'll see like rough pencils and layouts and pages for us to look at to decide, does that look right? Does that look like it, what we described in our descriptions and things like that? And then from there, full pencils and inks, and from there, lettering, and from there, coloring. It's very, very layered, and we love to get emails from Matt. It's kind of like, oh, what are we seeing now? What is this going to be?
Well, how much control do you like to maintain over the artwork, lettering, colors in a project? Are you kind of giving Igor like full panel designs, or is it more of a go with it? Or
we kind of give him almost like, the only time we're super specific is when we feel it needs to be super specific.
Yeah.
Okay. We kind of tell him what we're seeing in our head, and hoping that his interpretation is better than what we're seeing in our head.
Yeah. Occasionally it is.
Yeah. Usually you'll get something back. Every once in a while you'll get something back, and you'll say, "Oh, geez, that probably needs to be changed because of this coming up on page 15." But that's usually the extent of our meddling in an artist's work. We really don't. I don't like to. I'm teaching her not to. just because of the fact that they're doing, they're pulling out of their own head. And like I said, 99% of the time, that's way better than what's in my head.
Yeah, that's true.
Is Pantha designed to be an ongoing series, or is it limited?
As of right now, they're telling us it's ongoing, but they want us to approach it in story arcs. So
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure what their business plan is with that, but
Okay.
we have been told that it's a ongoing series.
Okay. And the first arc is going to be roughly how many issues?
Five issues for the first arc, and by the end of the 5th issue, you'll see where Panther's going. It's kind of like everything is set up for her future in that 5th issue. Yeah, we're building up. Each issue builds up to something.
So who would you describe as the target reader for this book?
Oh God. You know what? When I approach like even my Vampirella work and something, my brain always goes to my old Marvel horror books of the 70s. My Tomb of Draculas, my Werewolf by Night, my Monster of Frankenstein. That kind of action adventure horror title.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of picturing that with a little touch of Neil Gaiman.
Okay.
There's a little feel of American Gods in there, maybe, as a little influence. But yeah, I mean, I think your average Vampirella reader, somebody who enjoys like kick butt female characters will probably really get a kick out of it. Yeah, that's my goal. I mean, I don't know what Jeannine's looking for. I mean, she doesn't know
anything.
She doesn't know.
Well, Jeannine, did you grow up with comics? I mean, what are kind of some of your inspirations as a writer? And it doesn't have to be comics.
I grew up reading Archie comics and things like that. When Tom and I were hanging around in high school, he had given me a bunch of comics, and I read things like Moon Knight, and you gave me, I think, Spider-Man and
X-Men, Batman.
Yeah, X-Men, that kind of thing. And I read them, and then I kind of drifted off into other things. But now that I'm back, like my favorites are things like The Nice House on the Lake, The Sandman, anything Batman, Vampirella, of course. So yeah, I've kind of developed a new appreciation for comics.
So working together, you obviously, you've got comics, you're working on book stuff. Is kind of this sort of pseudo mythology horror niche where you'd like to stay, or are there plans to kind of do something else maybe even?
I think so. I think it's funny because I've been getting a little bit better about developing ideas of my own. That's kind of where I'm stuck, where I have an idea, but I can't really plot the whole thing out. But every time I have an idea, it might start out as an innocent idea, but then it kind of turns like wonky. It turns dark, and I'm like, apparently that's where I belong, I think. So yeah.
Basically, that's way too much time spent with me. That's all I can say.
That's influence right there.
Oh, terrible influence. Terrible.
Well, everybody loves their variant covers. So do you know off the top of your head how many there are for issue 1?
Of Pantha?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How many were there of the variants? Like 5? There weren't as many as like say Vampyverse had or Vengeance of Vampirella had. I think there was 5. I think there were 5, weren't there?
I thought there were more. Didn't we see more in the preview book?
Maybe. Occasionally, we'll find some that we didn't even know they were there. I mean, we never saw that cover because what happens a lot is certain stores pay to have their own cover.
Right. Okay.
So we may not see that cover because it was for a specific store. But occasionally it'll pop up online and we're like, hey, wait a minute, we got to get that one.
We got it.
Yeah. So these are the emails you're talking about where they show up and it's Christmas all over again?
Yeah, kind of.
Well, that's pretty cool. Well, tell me about some other projects you guys have going on. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight today? Other stuff you've got going?
What can we talk about?
Don't we?
We have this novel that we finished,
Yeah.
this monstrosity
It's huge.
that basically we would just, during the pandemic, we sat down and we plotted out this epic novel and actually wrote the thing. And
Yeah.
how many months did it take us to write the book?
7 months. It took us.
7 months.
Yeah.
It's giant and
Unwieldy.
unwieldy and flabby, and it needs all kinds of work. But we
Yeah.
wrote a book, and it was
Yeah.
really, really cool and really, really fun. And we're in between our comic shenanigans. We're tinkering with getting it whipped into shape and getting rid of that fat, and hopefully have it to my agent within this year. Hopefully, we'll hopefully have it this year.
So
As far as comic stuff, Pantha we'll continue
Panthers
with
getting there.
Pantha.
Almost done with her.
We've got a couple of little secret projects that don't have homes yet.
Okay.
Some creator-owned stuff that doesn't have a home yet, but we're starting to see artwork now because we're putting together a nice proposal, and that's getting us all excited about
Yeah,
that.
that's super exciting.
Yeah, that was super. And to give Jeannine credit, that was an idea that just popped into her head, and she said, "Hey, what if this was this?" And I was like, that's just not a short story idea. That's a really good potential series idea. And it kind of grew out of that. So she gets her idea.
So what I'm hearing is if I want to be successful in the comics universe, what I need to do is go back to one of my high school reunions and find some of these people that I gelled with really well back then, see what they're doing, and come up with a project.
Yeah.
Basically. That's I mean, honest to God, never saw any of this coming.
Yeah.
This was completely
Total kismet.
Yeah, both of us totally surprised. Every day it would be like, "What are we doing? What is this?" So it's been really fun.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing to go to the office or even to work from home, and we'll be talking about giant scorpion-like insect drones, or a woman who turns into an 800-pound panther. And I think to myself, okay, last year at this time, and I've since retired from teaching, last year at this time I was teaching 12-year-olds, and this year I'm talking about giant scorpion-like insect drones. So my life has taken a complete 180, and it's awesome.
That's amazing. I mean, our lives take so many different turns. I mean, I feel like I've lived 3 or 4 already myself. So Pantha, I know we're dealing with shipping delays in the comics universe.
Oh yeah.
So issue 1, is it currently on shelves then?
Yes.
Yeah. Issue 1 hit like about about a month ago.
Okay.
Just about a month. Earlier this month, January 5th, I think it was.
Yeah. So we should be expecting 2 hopefully sometime in February.
Yeah.
But 2.
Okay.
With the shipping craziness and the printing nonsense and stuff. So hopefully 2 in February.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Tom and Jeannine, thanks for joining me today to talk about Pantha. I appreciate you guys so much.
Thanks
for having us.
Yeah, we love to any chance we get to talk about this stuff is great.
I know.
Well, issue 1 is available now.
Yep.
Issue 2 should be out in February. So make sure to look for it on your local comic book shop shelves or wherever you get your comics digitally these days.
Yeah.
So this is Byron O'Neill for Comic Book Yeti. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you next time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. We also have a podcast of the same name that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.